Saturn-Uranus square, which is a hot topic for anyone who follows the readings of the planets in the skies. But more than the Saturn-Uranus square, which I am sure tens of thousands of people have talked about to the uptint degree, I want to talk about the other bodies and the other alignments that are around the Saturn-Uranus that actually give it a lot more power than we would imagine it to have. So, just in terms of a nutshell, let's do a quick recap because some of you will be familiar with it, and some of you will be overly familiar with it. But let's just do a very quick recap of what the Saturn Uranus square is about. So, this year, there are three instances of the square. A square is an aspect that can bring about intense change, intense conflict, intense crisis. But when handled in a way that sees that crisis as an opportunity or challenge, a square can actually yield some very, very creative outcomes as well. It can be destructive, it can be creative. It really, really depends on how you take the energy, as is true with just about any aspect in astrology. So when we have two very large planets that are relatively slow moving, for example, vis-a-vis something like Venus or the Sun or Mercury, Saturn is far, far, far slower, and Uranus takes a lot longer than that to get anywhere. Now, Saturn's energy is all about what we anchor, what is our legacy, what do we, seek to contribute in the world, how do we do this, in who do we actually invest the authority to hold energy. All of these questions come up. And these are very important things because ultimately these kinds of questions inspire you to look at whether or not the authorities and structures of the world, you know it, actually resonate with what you need. And one of the reasons why people feel the world is so shit right now is because they are recognizing that those authorities they have invested their belief and their faith in simply do not fit the bill. They are not doing the job they were supposed to be doing. And that's one of the reasons why we are in this situation of intense change and intense flux. People are alive to these facts, but they don't know what to do about it, short of, glorious revolution, which people talk about doing, but that hasn't quite happened yet. Practically speaking, such changes in society tend to take place over time and often because of culture, because of technology, because of increased education, because of just people becoming more aware of what's actually going on. And these kinds of pressures are what lead to those eventual changes. But there is still something very wrong with the system of the material world. I would also say the metaphysical world, in which the problem of the 1% still exists. And effectively, this is not to say that people do not have the right to be rich and so on and so forth, but there is a certain threshold point past which your wealth literally depends upon fleecing other people who really do need some assistance or some support and so on and so forth. So, Saturn in Aquarius's energy is very much about the collective waking up to the structure of reality as is. And I know a lot of people have said, this means, Jupiter and Saturn and Aquarius together, this is the start of the age. It is not. It is an important precursor. It is one of those events that really pushes us along the path, but it is certainly not the start of the new age. We still have a lot of the old age to dismantle, again, metaphysically and physically speaking. So, Saturn in Aquarius is all about recognizing those structures that exist and trying to find ways to create alternate structures. So, look at people who are roughly in their 30s, in their 60s, and also in their 90s. Look at what kinds of ideas they are working towards developing in their lives right now. How do they see the world? Do they see the world through the lens of the status quo, or are they searching for something different? That doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who is searching for something different or an alternative to the system that exists necessarily does so in a way that is aligned. The intention might be there, but Aquarian energy can also get fucked up. For example, a scientist who is not at all in connection with their emotions, not at all thinking about consequences, may simply go off the deep end, create some weapon of mass destruction, and say, well, I could do it. Well, I did it because I could. And the research and the technology was really exciting, and I thought I could use it for some noble ideal, but it turned out this way. That's also a very Aquarian trait. Sometimes Aquarius can get very, very caught up in its own ideals that it doesn't really look at how its stubbornness prevents it from engaging with the reality that exists. So it's not just about saying it's Saturn in Aquarius, everything's going to change. No, that has its own baggage to deal with. One of the good things I see about the Saturn in Aquarius energy is that, again, it is using technology to raise awareness. You can use your phone to look at TikTok all day. You can also use your phone to read and learn, to, I don't know, get however many degrees or look at however many master classes you want. Or you can just learn more about the world that is around you using the medium of technology. But sometimes some people prefer to do that without, which I equally respect. But effectively, people are waking up and there is no stopping that process. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is Uranus and Taurus. Now, Uranus is effectively the ruler of Aquarius. And Uranus's energy, like Aquarius, is all about revolution. It is all about transformation and change. It is all about breaking down old structures that no longer function so that the collective realizes its own worth and value. The big difference between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius is that in Pisces, the individual was not valued. Anything could happen to the individual. The individual could get sacrificed if it meant everyone else was going to be okay. And that's very much a Piscean ethos or ethos. More often than not, women and those who identify with the feminine essence, irrespective of their gender identification, they are the ones that tend to have been sacrificed the most, I would say. When a guy does it, they get pedestalized in a different way. But there has been an expectation for spiritual women and being of different understandings of gender throughout history. But effectively, that logic does not work any longer. And that is one of the key things that, especially people who are spiritual seekers, spiritual facilitators, or even just people trying to understand, that's one of the big shifts that they are really struggling to wrap their head around. They don't need to suffer in order to be sacred. They do not need to be depleted in order for someone else to benefit, because this is an age that encourages self sufficiency. Or rather, I should say, we are walking towards that age in which each individual is expected to be the best that they can be so that the collective receives the best outcome. So, with Saturn in Aquarius clashing, squaring, potentially creating something with Uranus and Taurus, it's very much about revolution, change, 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 and transformation. And this is an energy that is uncompromising because it's not going to tolerate bullshit anymore. I was talking about this with a friend today, and we were both looking at parallel situations in our lives where we just had to say goodbye to people that we had known for a very long time because they were no longer, they had already chosen what path they were going to go on, what they were going to be, how they were going to do it, but they still did not want to detach from the energy of whatever we were doing respectively. It's funny, it's a friend I talk to very rarely, but still a friend. It's just funny that we were going through the same thing at exactly the same time. And it's just like, yeah, this is the time where we have to draw hard lines. There's no exception. So when we look at the Uranus-Saturn square, we think about now Uranus in Taurus. Uranus in Taurus asks us to transform our relationship with manifestation, our relationship with abundance, our relationship with land, with money, with the values that or rather the values that we use to understand what constitutes success and comfort and joy. And in some sense, in a very positive way, it is an excellent time for all of us to be looking at our relationship with the processes of food production, with agriculture, with conservation, with understanding how it is we need to value the labor of those whose labor gets overlooked most of all. I remember when I was still in academia, in fact, my supervisor was someone who actually put forward the concept that really the way we calculate the GDP of nations is not at all, it's not at all accurate because the labor of women, especially in the home, is almost completely ignored. So the very way in which we have developed this metric to understand how much wealth is generated, what is done, is really skewed because a lot of women are not even being recognized for the work of creating a home, providing providing food, maintaining the space, providing childcare. It's just ignored in so many parts of the world. It's a very fundamental omission that tells you how stilted our relationship with understanding wealth and value is. So, that's at the collective level. At the personal level, it's also about looking at wealth and value in yourself. It is about looking at how much have you allowed to have been taken from you and why. Why have you been allowing this? Has this been from some old karmic contract you had however many thousand years ago? Is it because somebody told you that you had to give everything away to be a good person? Why have you been allowing this? This is where a lot of those types of questions also come in. At a physical level, a lot of people will be feeling a focus on the cervical collar, the throat, the pineal gland. All of these areas will be very highly activated for some. But what I also want to make people aware of is that this particular energy is a clash. We may come into, an awareness of competing ideologies and competing philosophies and competing ways of seeing the world. And sometimes the only thing we can do is to say, I can't walk this path with you. Take care, all the best, nothing is owed, and keep moving on. This is also a time where we're going to be seeing a lot of endings like that just because there is no room left to hide. And I've been actually seeing this as a build up the past couple of weeks. I've had quite a few clients that I've worked with for a very long time. More often than not, I end up giving way more of my time than I actually get paid for because I'm trying to help them. And for years, these people just do not shift. And they keep coming back and they keep saying the same problem and they just refuse to listen. And it's been a build-up, but really, this year has been a lot about just saying, no, I'm not going to let my energy go to waste anymore. Not here to be somebody's battery. I'm not here to make someone feel good just because they look at my face. They think that I've done some spiritual work by talking with the sky priestess. It's not true. You have to do that work within. So, it's also been also clearing out a lot of that room. But at the same time, the more boundaries I draw, the more generous I find I am actually able to be to people who deserve it and people who are not going to take me for granted. In some sense, the more you cut away at the dead weight, the more you actually can find room to help those who can help you or who can actually contribute something to make the work that you do sustainable. And this is not just me. The reason why I'm talking about my process is because it'll also resonate with a lot of other people. And we just have to be very real with these questions right now. I know that, I mean, I've been doing this for a few years now. I know that these questions bring up a lot of guilt in facilitators. It brings up a lot of reactivity, a lot of defensiveness, a lot of people immediately wanting to pedestalize themselves. Either they'll be like, oh no, I am beyond money, or oh no, I will save everybody, or oh no, it doesn't matter if I get hurt. And I'll be like, good luck to you. When you come back 20 years down the line and ask me, what did I do? Why am I stuck in this cycle of brokenness and woundedness? I might not even take your case because I won't know what to say. And that has also happened. So, what I would say in terms of I mean, it's very much microcosm, macrocosm. It's the same lesson, just mirrored over and over and over again. And what you see in your lives around you, the key decisions that you need to make in your immediate 3D environment is very much what you need to be doing in terms of your relationship with the collective. Now, one thing I do want to say before we get into the asteroids that aspect Saturn and Uranus and so on, one of the things that has really been coming up as a recurrent theme is false light. Unfortunately, spirituality is a business. It's a business in the sense that anyone can get into it with or without proper training. Anyone can make any claims. It's impossible to regulate because it's so subjective. And whilst, as a facilitator who does charge for services, I recognize the need for that. As an industry, I also recognize where there's a lot of lassitude where there shouldn't be. There's a lot of lassitude. They're it's like a very irregular understanding of the energy that you put into a situation and what you get back in exchange. Like there are some extraordinary people who find it so difficult to charge even a little bit. And then there are some people who, I have to frankly say, don't do much at all, um, but can actually find the gall to charge that much. And I'm just like, holy heck, there is something collectively wrong with the relationship that spiritual seekers, spiritual facilitators have with the understanding and energy of money. So, this is also a wake up call for people in the field to really look at, are you valuing yourself adequately? Are you overselling or underselling? If you're doing it consciously, be aware of what you're doing and why. If you are asking for too much, ask yourself how you can actually upgrade your services. If you are asking for too little, ask yourself why. I mean, I had a recent session as well where I brought the same point up, and that individual just got so triggered. I didn't even say anything, I just asked why. That it just brought up so much of issues. Just that simple question of, why aren't you actually charging something that is commensurate to your services? And they couldn't answer the question. So this is one of those things for everyone in the field that they need to think about, they need to look at, and they need to get very, very realistic about. Because the more honest you are with the flow of abundance, the more what you need will find you. And you don't need to be gimmicky about it. You don't need to, play the game. You don't need to try and be all sexy in your presentation, unless that's part of your service and you want to do that. But you don't need to basically try to turn it into a normal business, because it's not. Another big theme that spiritualists are also facing right now, and this is linked to that intersection between commercialism and false light. The more you want to project yourself a certain way, the more space you create. So if you are actually either in your head or in the way you present yourself, if you are not in synchronistic resonance with what you actually are and what you actually do, I guarantee that something is going to be sitting in your aura, whether or not you know it. I mean, it takes years of work before a person can really, really, really be ready to work with other people. Obviously, there are some very key exceptions which I recognize, but too many people have done too little within themselves and want to call themselves facilitators. And honestly, that pisses me off. It pissed me off even when I began this work. And I looked at it and I was just like, yeah, it's one of the reasons why why a lot of people look at me and just kind of go, oh no, she's going to tell me something I don't want to hear, so I'm not going to talk to her. And that is fine. I don't need people like that as part of my business anyway. But what is imperative now is to recognize whether or not the claims you are making and the space you are holding is something that you actually know how to fill. Many people are being afflicted by the false light phenomenon right now, in which they think they're talking to guides, they think they're talking to gurus, they think they're talking to something holy and sacred, but it really is nothing but. And because they feel so excited that they can talk to something or that they can feel something, they are basically headed into the opposite direction, you know? And that's not something you can do anything about, because you cannot help someone who is utterly convinced of the rightness of their perspective. If there is anything I have learned, it is that you must be willing to drop the idea that you know everything. Whatever I say through experience, I say through testing it, observing it over and over and over again. And I say, you know what, I might change my mind if the data and evidence show me to be wrong. That is the baseline that anyone in the field has to have. And I don't see enough of that. So, when we actually look at this field as a whole, and it's so important to talk about this because spiritual seekers and facilitators are the people who are closest. Obviously, there's some people who have no idea what they're doing and they're already there, but people who are looking for this consciously tend to be the closest people doing the work of actively transforming the energy that prevents our planet from changing in the way it needs to. So when you have the people who should have the training, who should have the humility, who should have the strength, who should have the alignment within to do the work, when they themselves fail to do what they need to do, you understand why we get that sheer wave of dissonance and disillusionment that we see in spiritual circles. And we understand why So much of the energy of the planet has not yet shifted, even though it could. When you think about how many major spiritual events that have been happening, whether it's 1987 harmonic convergence, whether it's 2012, whether it's, whether it's, well, now really 2020, all of these events by right should have already led to that transformation, that creation of critical mass by right. I saw this in a vision like late 2019, just before, coronavirus became a thing. I'd already looked at it as a vision, and I was telling my brother, I was like, something bad is happening. And it just is, this entire wave of false light energy has just permeated so many people I know. And the thing is, you can't reach them because they're so convinced that what they're doing is right. And this is also something that you're going to be acknowledging and seeing as part of this energy. And let me tell you, it is very, very, very painful. But that's another facet of it. But getting to the astrology orbit, now it's not just the Saturn Uranus square that's happening right now, it is also being aspected by multiple other bodies in the skies. Let me just grab my mouse, which has fallen down. Hang on. Come on, mouse. Where are you? I see. Hang on. Just getting my mouse. Just getting my mouse. Anyway, you can tell that was on my mind. I'm just like, ah. But let's see. So, in terms of just the basics, right? Because whatever is happening right now is not in isolation, it's not just one alignment. But when you actually give a little bit of leeway to the inconjuncts, you just add the orbs a little bit, you actually see that there are multiple yods or multiple fingers of fate that are connected to the Saturn-Uranus square. Now, first of all, and this needs to be acknowledged, the Saturn-Uranus square is not just the Saturn-Uranus square, it's actually Saturn-Uranus and Ceres. Ceres is the mother nurturer, but as I like to remind the people in my Tier 23 program, it is also one letter away from the mother smotherer. Ceres indicates where we tend to have issues of control and power dynamics in relationships of nurture. That can happen with family of origin. It can also happen with people who are trying to project that same parental dynamic with you. And this is certainly something that a lot of potential of breakthrough and transformation is present with, especially at this time. So if you're in a dynamic or in a situation where you feel like someone is trying to control you through money, walk away. If you feel that you are in a situation or dynamic where someone positions themselves as the nurturer and pedestalizes themselves in that way, again, walk. If you're going to help someone, do it without strings attached or be very, very clear with your boundaries. And at the same time, if you are receiving help, you need to make sure that you're not taking someone for granted. And if you've been following me for a while and you are still doing this, then maybe not follow me anymore. I'm tired of holding energy for people who don't listen. So, what I see here is that the Saturn Uranus square is, of course, bringing up these different dynamics with the energy of the mother and the energy of the nurturer. I mean, look at what we've done to this planet. We've completely taken her for granted. There is no wonder that she's pissed, okay? There is no wonder that she's pissed. Look at so many religious and spiritual understandings of the feminine through different traditions. They take the feminine for granted. And you know me, I'm not going to say the feminine is just women. It is anyone who resonates with an archetype of femininity, which I believe is beyond, secondary sexual characteristics to begin with. Some of the greatest feminine teachers that I know of have actually been men, and vice versa for teachers of the masculine. So, it's one of those times where we have to really hold ourselves accountable as to are we taking too much and what are we doing to give back? Now, around this and connected to this by way of multiple yods, multiple fingers of fate, I will give you a couple of things. So, for example, first of all, we see Saturn in a yod with Juno, the great attractor, and Venus. Saturn's at 13 Aquarius, Juno is at 14 Sagittarius with the great attractor, Venus is at 14 Cancer. It's a very important time for us to be, again, looking at questions of resources, relationships, and our larger connection with the feminine. It is also a time for us to be choosing what paths we are walking on and what paths we are walking away from. What soulmates or soul companions on our journey have we finished our walk with, and which ones are we actually continuing on with? So it's really a big crossroad type of energy coming up there. We also see another yod between Saturn, again at 13 degrees Aquarius in retrograde, Vesta, the facilitator, at 16 degrees of Virgo, and once again Venus at 14 degrees of Cancer. So the question is rephrased in a different way. What commitment to a particular type or style of service is getting ingrained in you right now? What old types or old versions of service are you walking away from, and what are you walking towards? Now, this also brings me to a point where, yes, I understand people are very, very excited about learning about spiritual traditions and stuff from long, long ago, from different cultures that they've never been exposed to. But the truth is, all of them are part of the old occult system. You're basically just swapping one system that you may have grown up with something else from a different land, which will have its own baggage. So really think about that. So much things of the things that we actually see as part of the New Age marketplace are not at all things of the New Age. They're still the same old systems. I mean, if it's whether we look when we look at the tools, when we look at the rituals, when we look at the types of services that are being provided at this time, very rarely do you actually see facilitators or service providers or priests or priestesses who are actually doing something that is in alignment with the new. They're basically just taking the same old stuff, but from a different culture and calling it new for a primarily North American, European audience. That is also something that really needs to be taken into consideration. But that's a huge discussion and a huge subject in and of itself. And you get me started on the hidden spiritual and political baggage of religions, that is a different subject. But anyway, so those are two yods. Another yod that we see is between Uranus and Ceres. Uranus at 13 degrees Taurus, Ceres at 14 degrees Taurus, Venus at 14 Cancer, and Juno and the great attractor once again at 14 degrees of Sagittarius. Here the question again is about soulmates, the people that we walk this journey with, and whether or not we continue to walk together on a particular path of truth or not. Are our soulmates actually people that we want to continue walking with at this time? Do we share a similar version or understanding of what it is to honor the feminine? Is the feminine being honored in that connection? Do we have the trust to allow that to emerge? Or are we just blinding ourselves to a very obvious situation of disregard on that aspect? If there's one person who is playing the role of nurturer, ensure that that person is compensated in a certain way. Even if you are giving love from just the purest, most wonderful space in your heart, that's good for you. But if someone just keeps receiving it, receiving it, receiving it without giving much back, that's actually bad for them. That's a different type of karma. You do not want the karma of being the entitled person. Really think about that and look at that again. So that's one, two, wait, no, it's one, two, and I think three yods that we've talked about. There's a fourth one as well. We see Saturn at 13 degrees of Aquarius in retrograde, Chiron at 12 degrees of Aries, with Vesta at this time at the apex of the yod. Here we need to see again what parts of service, what boundaries surrounding facilitation, what approaches to health, what approaches to giving and receiving are actually vital in helping us develop a better relationship with the collective and the parts of ourselves and our individual energies that need recognition and healing. Very often, wounded healers ignore their own wounds. It's not to say that a person has to be completely healed before they can heal someone else, but they have to develop the awareness to understand more or less what they are about, to know where their blind spots are before they try to work with another person. Otherwise, what you tend to do is you tend to start working with energies, teachers, pathways that keep reinforcing those blind spots so that you're never really going to know what you end up letting in. It's also a very important time to be looking at what pathways of physical healing that you may be using in your life at this time and whether or not those still resonate. But these are just some of the yods, some of the fingers of fate that are really asking us to make very powerful decisions, very powerful choices at this time over so very many different aspects of our lives. I mean, given the fact that today we also see the Sun at 23 Gemini squaring Neptune at 23 degrees of Pisces, we also see this energy of really needing to cut through the bullshit so that we can find the path ahead. And that path doesn't have to be something lofty somewhere. That path can simply be that very immediate truth of this is what I am in the here and now, and I no longer need to carry the script or baggage of what is being woven for me, whether it's in a different space, whether it's from a past life, or whether it's whatever. I decide what my spiritual path is in the here and now. What I have around me is already enough to help me navigate. And in some sense, this is a way, this is a time, an invitation for people to really come to that awareness. We also see the Sun at 23 degrees of Gemini, sextile Thereus, the hunter stalker, at 25 degrees of Leo. That actually creates another yod, another finger of fate with Pluto. So we've got a very powerful Sun, um, hang on, Sun, Thereus, and Pluto yod going on at the same time. This is a time where we cannot afford to hide behind our fears and insecurities, and we must come out, we must confront what it is that we are still allowing to exist. The system is not going to change unless we actually have the courage to look at where in our individual lives we are still allowing it to continue to exist. I mean, when you look at things from an abstract perspective, things like politics, things like economics have nothing to do with spiritual perspectives because you think, well, it's a system. But in truth, that's not the case. All of these systems have a metaphysical component. And when we choose to participate in certain systems in a certain way, we are also empowering certain energetic configurations in the hidden realms. So, this is why asking these questions are so very important, especially for people who do this work. But, that is what I wanted to say about this. There's a ton of information, a ton of stuff there. Last but not least, it's also very important to recognize that we actually see Pluto aspecting Black Moon Lilith as well. So Pluto is at 26 degrees Capricorn, and Black Moon Lilith is at 26 degrees of Taurus. I believe she is very close to Sedna, the dismembered feminine, at the same time. This is a time where we also need to look at how our choices, be it in political systems, be it in economic systems, be it in spiritual traditions, be it in the religions we follow, be it in the philosophies that we believe in, how have these systems kind of swept or brushed away aspects of the feminine that did not fit neatly into them? Where are those hidden sacrifices of the true expression of the feminine being hidden? And that is also something that is coming out very, very strongly at this time. Okay, now I can look at comments. And we're at 33 minutes. Woo! Okay. All right, I'm not going to do the hellos, but hello, everyone. Let me just go to the questions. Let's see. Shin says, which is why our false leaders are putting out many information to confuse us and stay off our path. Correct. Davina, do you think anything will happen in the world news today? It's very likely. Um, Shin wants to know, where is Kitty? Kitty is looking outside the window romantically, feeling all alone, even though she's so very loved. But anyway. Da 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 da. Oh, right, no, we're cool. We are cool, we are cool. So, I give all of you thanks for listening. In terms of working with me, please be aware that, sessions are going to be even more direct and to the point. But I am taking a little break from them because I feel that this is a time where you need to be sitting with yourself to figure out and understand your own truth. And I'm kind of putting a cutoff point till about the 18th when things start to resume. But effectively, yes, look at what is in your life, look at the energy of what is around you, and be truthful to who you actually are. And sometimes that truth hurts. One of the things that is hardest to acknowledge is where And as someone who has walked this journey and who has had to learn those lessons already, which is why I keep looking out for them, going, am I going to am I going to do something that's stupid again? Um, but it's always very important to look at where you may be your own blind spot, where your desire to be right, your desire to know, your desire to be able to control, to label, may actually be blocking you from seeing the truth of what is. Hang on. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Someone asks, Doa asks, Priestess, is there a link between elephants in dreams and the current astrology? Um, it really depends, honey. What pantheon is it from? It might have a more direct meaning and direct significance to you. So that one is a bit hard to answer. Let's see. Mm-mm-mm. Okay, I would say that is a wrap. I send all of you much love, very, very many blessings. Remember that we have a third Uranus Saturn square coming up at the very end of the year. So there is still change, there is still transformation. But to be honest, I was telling my friend today, people have already chosen what path they are on. They already chose it last year. Right now, they are recognizing what that path is. No more room for comfortable lies, no more room for pretty illusions. Take care. Very many blessings. Ciao, ciao for now. Bye bye.